Welcome, students. Today, I would like to deliver a lecture on Elizabethan poetry. In the first semester, you are going to learn about poetry, especially Elizabethan and metaphysical poetry. This section focuses on the types of lyrical poetry, sonnets, songs, and elegy. Poetry is one of the major forms of literature. Poetry can be defined in many ways. I would like to quote or I would like to mention Wordsworth defines poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Poetry can be divided into two types: subjective or personal poetry, and objective or impersonal poetry. In subjective poetry, the poet expresses his emotions, feelings, thoughts, and experiences. This type of poetry is called lyrical poetry. The objective poetry deals with the outside world. It gives a very little room to personal feelings and emotions. The personal poetry is divided into lyric, ode, song, sonnet, and elegy. The objective poetry is divided into ballad, epic, and dramatic monologue, etc. As I mentioned earlier, this session 3 to 6, deals with the Elizabethan poetry. So let's discuss in detail on the topic Elizabethan poetry. The Elizabethan age was regarded as a great age of English literature. English literature flourished and witnessed its culmination during this age. The Elizabethan literature refers to the bodies of work emerged during the period of Queen Elizabeth, that's 1558 to 1603. However, the proper Elizabethan literary age began in 1579 with the publication of Spenser's Shepherd Calendar. It was a great flourishing age for English literature, especially in the fields of drama and poetry. Thomas Kidd, Christopher Marlowe, and William Shakespeare popularized drama. Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Dr. Faustus, and Macbeth ruled over the masses during those age. Poetry also obtained popularity during this age along with the drama. It became a chief form of literature. William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, Philip Sidney, Walter Raleigh, Christopher Marlowe are the important poets of Elizabethan age. This age is also known as the age of Shakespeare. The poetic forms sonnet, elegy, lyric, ode, and song became popular in this age. Let's study them. Let's focus our discussion on the types of Elizabethan poetry. Elizabethan lyric. The Elizabethan lyrical poetry is the glory of the age. It produced many beautiful lyrics. Sweet songs were written and published during this period. So, the age is called the nest of singing birds. Love was the chief theme of lyrics, which was expressed in various ways. One of the finest lyricists of the age was Sir Philip Sidney. He was a courtier, soldier, and a poet. His famous book of sonnets is Astrophila and Stella. It was published after his death. Another great poet of the age was Sir Walter Raleigh. He was also a soldier, courtier, and poet. His poetry is known for the plain style. Most of his poems are short lyrics. They were inspired by actual events. His lyrics have the themes like love, loss, beauty, and time. What is our life is his famous lyric. Some examples of Elizabethan lyrics can be found in Shakespeare's plays. So, one of the major type of uh, Elizabethan poetry is the Elizabethan sonnets. Elizabethan sonnet made the Elizabethan poetry rich and vivid. The sonnet was born in Italy. Petrarch introduced sonnet in Italy. Thomas Watt and Earl of Surrey brought into England. They introduced sonnets to English literature. The famous poet Thomas Watson made some experiments in the sonnet form. Earlier, the sonnet was written in 18, 15, or 12 lines. The rhyme scheme depend on the wish of the poet. During the period of Sydney, sonnet was written in 14 lines and it was written in iambic meter. Most of the sonneteers followed Italian Petrarchan method, separating lines into two groups: octave, the beginning 8 lines, and sestet, the last 6 lines. But Shakespeare divided it into 3 groups, 4 lines in each group. He also introduced a final couplet of 2 lines. The rhyme scheme was varied. Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser, and William Shakespeare are the well known sonneteers of the Elizabethan era. Next, if we focus on Elizabethan song, a song became popular in the Elizabethan age. The court of the Elizabethan age is called a nest of singing birds. Even Shakespeare wrote many beautiful songs for his plays. The Elizabethan age witnessed many kind of songs: love songs, religious songs, patriotic songs, war songs, and philosophical songs. They carried every mood: grave, romantic, sentimental, mocking, etc. Love is the main theme of Elizabethan songs. The other themes of songs are joy, sorrow, praise of um, wine, childhood, and nature. Sir Philip Sidney wrote many songs. They express passion, beauty, romance, and fancy. They have loftiness and superb musical quality. His famous songs are Only Joy, Now Here You Are, and Rings Out Your Bell. Shakespeare wrote many beautiful songs for his comedies and romances. His songs are spontaneous, fresh, and they carry rustic realism. Some of his songs expresses the touching feeling of love. Shakespeare has interested songs in his famous comedy, As You Like It. Shakespeare's contemporary dramatists also wrote songs for their plays. Thomas Dekker, Ben Jonson plays have lovely songs. Thomas Campion wrote attractive songs and lyrics. His famous collections of songs are Two Books of Airs and Songs of Mourning. They are very famous for high musical quality. Thus, a song is a very popular form of poetry. Even Lord Byron's She Walks in Beauty and Tennyson's Tears, Idle Tears are perfect examples of songs. Though they deal with a different mood, even John Donne has written songs. His Go and Catch the Falling Star is a very famous song. Um, Next, I think we need to focus on the pastoral poetry. This is one more form of elegy. It is known as pastoral elegy. It is very famous from the um, Elizabethan age, and it is one of the famous form of elegy. In this type of elegy, the poet is expected to speak as a shepherd. He weeps over the death of his fellow shepherd. The setting of this elegy is rustic life, and the poets used images like sheep, shepherds, flowers, and rural life. Pastoral poetry became popular in the Elizabethan era. Spenser's Shepherd's Calendar is the famous pastoral poem. Shakespeare also wrote pastoral poetry. Most of this type of poetry of this period is romantic by nature. Next type, satire. Satire grew and flourished in the Elizabethan era. Spenser's Mother's Hubbard's Tale is the best example of satirical poem. But John Donne is the most important poet of satire. He wrote the satire of classical type. His satires are serious and they are criticism of life. The best example is Of the Progress of the Soul. Uh, it's a very memorable satire. Humor, wit, and ironical descriptions have made his satires classical. Joseph Hall and Joseph Marston are also important satirical poets of the Elizabethan age. Next, religious and epic poetry. During the Elizabethan age, religious and epic poetry flourished. Robert Southwell wrote religious poetry. His St. Peter's Complaint is a famous religious poem. Edmund Spenser wrote romantic epic Fairy Queen. It was the first romantic epic, but as an epic, it is incomplete. The poetry is rich, vivid, beautiful, and natural. The poetry witnessed its golden period of this age. The Elizabethan songs and lyrics are very famous even today. They are a source of joy for the lovers of poetry. The Elizabethan poetry was rich in expression. So, dear students, let's move on to the important aspects of the topic, features of Elizabethan poetry. Yes, of course, a variety of poetical forms. The Elizabethan age was witnessed all varieties of poetic forms. As I said, sonnets, lyrics, songs, etc., were produced by many reputed poets. Sonnets traveled to England from Italy and they were refined by the poet like Shakespeare. Even Thomas Campion is a well known lyric poet of the age. He wrote over 100 lute songs. It was a generic form of music. Sir Philip Sidney is a well known poet of songs. Even Shakespeare wrote many songs. William Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, which were very famous in English literature. And even Edmund Spenser popularized pastoral elegy during the Elizabethan era. In short, a variety of poetical forms was used in the Elizabethan era. Even the use of metaphor, repetition, pun, and paradoxes, it's also one of the main features of Elizabethan poetry. This is the typical characteristic of Elizabethan poetry. The poets make use of metaphors. The metaphor is used to compare women to objects of rare beauty. The repetition is used to develop the theme of the poem, and the paradox is used to focus on the importance of opposite. So, William Shakespeare's sonnets are well known for metaphors, they are also famous for pun. Coming to the point of theme of romance and courtly love. The Elizabethan era is marked for love poetry, as we have discussed. Love poetry is characterized by romance, imagination, and youthful energy. Philip Sidney's Astrophila and Stella, Spencer's Amoroti, Daniel's Dahlia, and Christopher Marlowe's Hero and Leander, and Shakespeare's sonnets are famous and remarkable love poems of the spirit. Then patriotism is one of the noticeable characteristics of Elizabethan poetry. The poets William Warner, Samuel Daniel, Michael Drayton, um, uh, yes, they have written many memorable patriotic poems. For example, Daniel's Civil War of York and Lancaster, and Drayton's The Baron's War are the best examples of patriotic poetry. And Elizabethan sonnets, one of the best features of Elizabethan poetry is Elizabethan sonnets or English sonnets. Thomas Watt introduced Italian sonnet to England. Watt introduced the Petrarchan model. Elizabeth and sonnet are different from Petrarchan sonnets. Elizabethan sonnets are written in iambic pentameter and consist of 14 lines in each. They are divided into three quatrains and a couplet. So, I I would like to say that Elizabethan sonnets is one of the best features of Elizabethan poetry. So, my dear students, the lyrics of the periods is accompanied to music. Songs and lyrics of the period are very natural and not artificial. Songs and lyrics were interested in the place. Most of the dramatists were good poets. Sonnet sequence were very popular. People liked music and songs. The diction is mostly simple and sweet. So, apart from these uh, characteristics, originality, emotion, and fantasy are the characteristics found in Elizabethan poetry. Coming to the point of Elizabethan poets, Sir Thomas Watt and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. Watt and Surrey traveled to Italy and brought to England the Italic and classic influence. Thomas Watt wrote songs, sonnets, and elegies. The first book to feature his verse, Total's Miscellany of 1557, was published after his death. He followed the Italian model and introduced sonnets to England. He also introduced personal and autobiographical note in English poetry. Earl of Surrey he too wrote sonnets. His sonnets are very effective. He introduced a new form of sonnet. It was followed by Shakespeare. He was the pioneer of blank verse. Then Sir Philip Sidney and Walter Raleigh. Let me explain first the Sir Philip Sidney. He was the most respected literary figure before Shakespeare and Spencer. He has written prose, critical essays, and poetry. His Apology for Poetry is a collection of critical writings. His collections of sonnets, Astrophila and Stella, is very famous. And even Edmund Spenser is addressed as the poet's poet. His main poetical works are The Shepherd's Calendar, Amoroti, and The Fairy Queen, and even the Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. I think the greatest British dramatist William Shakespeare composed many beautiful sonnets, and Sir Walter Raleigh he fortified um, or Elizabeth's favor with his courtship of and subsequent marriage to one of her maids of honor, mm, especially in the year 1592. The discovery threw the queen into a jealous rage, and the couple were briefly imprisoned in the Tower of London. Uh, so, Raleigh hoped to recover his position with the queen, and yes, uh, Raleigh was an English adventurer and writer who established a colony near Ireland, um, Roanoke Island, and in present day North Carolina, which he named Virginia in present day North Carolina. He was imprisoned in the Tower of London and eventually put to death for treason. An early supporter of colonizing North America. Sir Walter Raleigh sought to establish a colony, but a queen forbid him to leave her service between 1585 to 1588. He invested in a number of expeditions across Atlantica, attempting to establish a colony near Roanoke on the coast of what is now North Carolina, and name it Virginia in honor of the Virginia Queen Elizabeth. So, to sum up, Elizabethan age was the great uh, age of English literature, poetry, and drama flourished in this era. Great dramatists Shakespeare, Marlowe, and other enriched English play and took them to the masses. In this era, poetry too flourished and became popular. Songs, sonnets, elegies, lyrics were produced and enjoyed. The English literature produced during the time of Queen Elizabeth is called Elizabethan literature. Um, it was the age of songs, lyrics, especially sonnets, patriotism, theme of love, Elizabethan sonnet, and a variety of poetical forms are the chief characteristics of Elizabethan poetry. Sir Thomas Wyatt, Sir Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe, George Chapman, and William Shakespeare are the important poets of the Elizabethan age. Thank you for listening.